Okay, we're on day 11. So today is the first day of us moving into the final leg of this series that we've been doing. And this leg is about how do you get important shit done? Right? So we're starting to get more into the mechanics and how do we kind of translate particularly all of the things that we've been talking about around values into how we manage our lives. How do we take action? So the first two legs are really important as part of that. So the first thing we looked at was about regulation, and the core message as part of that was the importance of slowing down enough to feel ourselves and be in connection with ourselves, and to be able to get perspective. It's kind of in these slower states of awareness that we tend to be able to kind of ponder the bigger picture of our lives and what's important to us a whole lot more. And then in the values segment, we talked a lot about kind of some of all the different nuances of how do we manage values when we have different parts of ourselves and we are in relationship with other people who might have different values. So we're going to take all of this and we're going to start to translate it into what do we do with it? So the first really essential piece of all of this is that we need to keep connecting with what's important to us. We can kind of go through these reflective practices and we can, in those practices, realize, oh my God, I'm not living actually what's most important to me. My life is off course. I need to shift the steering of it because actually, for me to feel like I've led a meaningful life, I need to, whatever it is, spend more time with the people I love or shift my work and do work that feels more meaningful, or
have a daily meditation practice.
Have a daily meditation, do things that are better for my well-being. So we can kind of have these moments of insight and revelation, but it can be really easy to then lose touch with that. Life gets so busy, there's so much noise and so much going on. So
inside and outside.
Inside and outside, totally. Yeah. So the first and foremost, I think remembering in a way is a really core thing that we need to do. We need to remember what's important to us. And something that can be simple here is just to kind of, when we're in these moments of deeper perspective and self-connection, kind of write down these things and then review them, come back to them, remember them, and come back to the feeling of them, the feeling of being connected with our hearts and being connected with kind of the fire in our bellies to take action, because it's our values which are our motivations. They fuel us, they inspire us and fill us with energy to take action from. So if we aren't in connection with our values, well, then it's hard to implement all of the structures that are going to help us actually make these things happen and have us living the lives that we really want to live. Let me just pause there and see if you want to add any stuff.
Well, I think just kind of jamming on the piece around self-esteem again that we've talked about a few times throughout this series. The more that we do the things that we say we're going to do and they're things that matter to us, then our self-esteem, so you can think of self-esteem like it's a verb, so we esteem ourselves. And so the more times that we act in alignment with the things that we say we're going to do or the things that we know are important to us, this has our esteem stay at a nice, robust, healthy level. And when we don't, then our esteem drops. So how do we re-esteem ourselves? We return back to that which we said we would do, that we care about. And so if you're somebody who knows that your self-esteem can stay in lows, then this is a fair, sure way to grow your esteem. And so it's not easy when our esteem is dipping. It's not easy to do the things that matter to us, because in those low dips of esteem, there are subconscious stories of, I don't matter, what's the point, I'm not going to get it done well anyway, I can't have it, life's against me, or our life actually is in some type of chaos because of subconscious thinking like that that's playing out elsewhere. So often to get that wheel back in motion doesn't feel easy, it feels hard actually. And there is a balance between listening to our bodies about what's right for us and making a call of, hang on a second, am I in one of those dips right now, and actually doing the thing that I know matters to me will on the other side of it, or after I've done it a few times, have me feeling more esteemed again. So I think, I just want to add that getting things started can feel hard, and it won't feel necessarily like cha-ching the first time that you do it, right? So esteeming ourselves is a process, but what I can promise you is that our esteem increases when we are doing the things that we said we were going to do that matter to us. So if you can have a list of what those things are and be sure that you're checking those off, or at least a portion of them, you know that you are esteeming yourself.
Yep. Yeah, great. And there's a way in which we can start to pay attention to when our esteem starts to dip, or whatever it is that we notice in ourselves when we're not actually living according to our values, and that's an important signal. That's a flag. Hang on, something's off here. I don't feel like I'm actually properly in my sense of importance and purpose and dignity, and then so that's I think an important flag to then go, let me remind myself, let me pause here and check in with myself. Hey, what is important to me again, and am I living that, and where am I not living that? And it's important as part of that process to be forgiving with ourselves. We're all works in progress. Absolutely. And imperfect, so it's that's the nature of being human, is I think constantly, to some degree, kind of falling off the horse and needing to get back on, and it's, I think as we grow, we tend to be able to get back on faster, and I think that's the name of the game, right? Is that we get better in a way at forgiving ourselves, we get better at kind of remembering what's important to us, and and then kind of gets to the point where we only fall off for a day or even an hour, and kind of, that's right, I'm not living who I want to be.
That's an expression of the greater our self-esteem, the easier it is to recover because it's familiar. And I like the definition of esteem, something like to hold ourselves in warm regard when faced with our imperfections, paired with returning back to doing the things or behaving in the ways that are in alignment with our values. Now, if you haven't asked yourself recently, or you're not in contact with that which matters to you, and that's okay, like, gosh, life can get so busy that you've been on a trajectory of busy for so long that maybe you haven't updated what the answer to that question is. And so you're in the right place. That's why we're doing these lives, this series. Go back to the portion where we started with the values on day 6, and do those processes that we've put in the comments. That'll have you in touch with what is deeply meaningful to you, so you can start to identify what would those actions be if you were doing them. What would your life look like if you were living in alignment with your values, with what we talked about last night, which is stay in reality about, actually it was the night before, stay in reality about how much you bite off at once. Actually, the name of the game here, if you're really wanting to live in alignment with your values, is to take it small steps so that they are achievable, so that you can have that feeling of, I did it, and another small step, and another small step, and another. Stay in reality about what you're capable of, and what's not just what you're capable of, because we're actually capable of a lot. When someone says to me, just do what you're capable of, that's actually not a good question. That's not a good suggestion for me, because I'm capable of doing a lot, but it's actually about, for my well-being to be really intact, for me to be feeling really spacious and regulated, what would that look like?
So as we get better at remembering what's important to us, it has us start to have more vision for ourselves. If I'm present to how I value those important relationships, and I value doing work that's meaningful, and I value looking after myself and being healthy, and I value my sense of spirituality and living with gratitude, and I keep putting attention on those things. As I do so, I start to imagine, wow, my life lived like this looks like that, looks like, more sense of juicy connection with people, and I can see myself doing this kind of work in which I'm like yes, like this is so good, I'm making a difference, like whatever it is, and this vision it has a creative force to it. It's a fuel, right? So what it has us start to step into though is more creative tension, and creative tension is an amazing energy, but it's not always super comfortable. So we could say that anytime we're in this gap between kind of what we envision and where we're actually at, that gap creates a particular tension. And this tension itself, if we know how to hold it well, is kind of, I think, the basis of what has us creating what we want effectively.
In this spot, this is where dissonance is. This is right here.
Dissonance.
There's dissonance here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly referencing the work of Robert Fritz right now, which I super like his work. So what's important as part of effectively holding this tension is that we hold both poles well. We hold the vision, and we stay connected to the vision, and we also stay in reality, right? And like Prem was just talking about, being reality of what we think we can actually do when we're spacious and make conscious choices for ourselves. So we need to kind of both be in truth, and be paying attention to, hang on, what are my blind spots, or where do I have work to do, or what's the reality of my finances for reals, and what does it mean I actually have to do to kind of get out of whatever it is, the hole of debt that I'm in, So properly being actually in the reality, and it's kind of can be pretty hard to really properly be in reality around that kind of stuff, because it can be painful, and there tends to be kind of dysfunction on each side, right? Either we're not in reality and we're delusion, and we can have all these dreams, and I've certainly experienced a lot of people like this, like they say they're going to do these amazing things and they blah blah blah, and beautiful, like I love it, love the vision of it, but if they're not in reality, they're kind of just lost in the clouds. They're not grounded and kind of actually able to think practically through what's going to need to happen to make the vision happen, so they just stay lost in the ideals and the kind of the fantasy of it, so that's really dangerous.
And it's missing the creative tension.
So the bottom side, you can imagine a rubber band between these two sides, and the bottom of the rubber band is just kind of floppy, so there's no tension in it, right? On the other side, I can be in reality, and it can start to all feel like too much, or I'm not connected with what's important to me, and the top side starts to dissipate. I don't have a sense of vision, or I don't believe.
That'd be the lamb roast.
I don't believe that I can actually make these things happen, and then I'm kind of just in a sense of hopelessness, or I'm just gonna go with the flow because it's all too hard, or what's the point anyway? And of course that's not going to be great. Then we're just kind of living day to day and not actually feeling the juice of being driven by the potential of what we most care about and what we can most care about. So learning how to hold that tension is really, really important. And we've talked about this quite a bit through this series, right? The dissonance that we feel in that tension can feel like a lot. It tends to create a lot of sensation in our bodies, and learning how to actually be in the intensity of that sensation and kind of ground in it is really important as part of being able to actually create what you want. And in a way, what starts to happen in living in this tension is that we become higher voltage. The tension itself creates this voltage inside of us, and we can either kind of collapse in that voltage by one of those two poles actually not being held properly, or we start to, that voltage actually has us more alive. It has us feeling kind of this kind of energy that we can use and we can channel. Okay, so what else do I want to say about that? So the other aspect of learning how to kind of ride this creative tension is in how we keep connecting to our sense of vision, connecting to reality, and look at kind of what needs to happen to start to resolve that tension. Like, of course, ideally what we want to do is we want the tension to resolve by kind of reality being pulled towards our vision, right? And that's kind of the power of the tension, is it kind of helps manifest, what we want to see happen. And we need to kind of use that tension and be so much in that sense of, this is important to me, and I'm not going to let go of that. I'm not going to collapse my vision because it's too hard. I'm going to stay connected to it because it's what has life feel worth living. And so if I stay in that, and then I use it to start to help kind of generate, well, what do I need to do? What does it look like for me to start making the changes that I want to create this thing in my life? And then it's through that energy kind of having us look at reality more closely that we start to generate kind of structure, that will make things happen. This is then when we start to, okay, well, I need to do some planning. I need to think about, well, how might I create this thing? Do I need to reach out to more friends or build more friendships because I'm not meeting my values around connection so much, or whatever it might be? So that process and of like creating plans and structure and building the habits, and this will all be a pretty important part of kind of what we talk about over the next few days, is then really important to kind of have us keep kind of iterating, of checking, okay, where am I in terms of moving towards what I want to create? Where do I need to pivot and make changes because I don't seem to be in alignment? And that continual process of asking ourselves that question has us over time ultimately start to make the changes in reality through taking action to create the life that we ultimately want to live. Is there anything on that?
Yeah, I think that to be in reality means to check at the different levels of domain. Am I actually giving myself the opportunity to actually make this happen? I've had historically, I've had clients who've talked about wanting to have a partner, wanting to have more friends, but they don't ever go out. They really stay at home all the time, or they have a lot of beliefs around, but then, since that last person that I was in a relationship with, there's never going to be anybody else like them. So I just looked at the physical domain, like, are you actually doing the things, taking the steps that would physically have you meet that reality? Yeah. Are you, if you want to have a healthy bank account, are you actually being with your numbers? Are you making more than you spend? These kinds of things. So yeah, in the physical domain, are you in reality? In the emotional domain, are you in reality about the feelings that you have about that? So, we're going to go into more of this throughout the next 5 days, but as an overview, that looks like then actually checking how are all my parts feeling, or I look at a parts lens, but it could be, what are the different emotions that I have about this, and relating to those and checking, are there any needs that you have around those emotions? And in the thought domain, what are my thoughts around this? How am I thinking about these things? So being in reality means being in reality at all levels of all domains of our experience. And to be able to do that, we need to be regulated, which is why we started with regulation. Yeah, regulation is so key. So it's normal, or it's expected, that when you get in touch with things that really matter to you, that certain parts of you may feel disoriented, excited, frightened, cautious, right? So that's actually, expect that. In fact, if it's something that really matters to you and you haven't been connected with it, or you haven't been acting towards that, expect that parts within your inner system are going to feel the shift in the homeostasis, which means you're going to be required to do extra regulation than you normally would. Like, expect that. So whilst our esteem goes up, it doesn't mean that we don't have to do more inner work, with parts of us who have resistance, resignation, fear, whatever it is about us taking those steps towards those things that will seem to parts of us possibly scary, right? Because to say yes to things that really turn us on and really light us up, that means we're going to grow. Yeah, that means that we are going to grow. You can guarantee that. That's what living from that which really matters to us, that's what it does to us. It evolves us, and we've talked about that throughout this series of how it has us become more self-authored, have a clearer sense of what's true for us, has us standing for what matters to us. All of that is about adult development. And so yes, it will require also, don't think that if you then have stuff coming up, that means that you're doing something wrong. It probably means you're doing something right, but it does mean that you're going to need more tools possibly, or to use those tools that you already have, so to have integrity with yourself around regulation.
Yeah. So like as we start to have more structure that's kind of pulled from this kind of creative tension, well, it will accelerate our growth, and it will have us confronted with more dissonance. And this is one of the interesting things about doing things like planning. Like planning itself is a kind of produces its own form of stress in a way, right? I start to like look at my upcoming week and I'm like, far out, like, how am I going to manage that thing? And I got to like get the kids to school, and I got to go do that task, and I got to fit that thing in here. And it's kind of inherently kind of has that quality of like, this doesn't feel that great, you know? So continuing to learn how to regulate ourselves, you know, as we start to like actually properly pay attention a lot more to, you know, lives, you know, reality and what we actually care about.
Yes.
And one of the really important aspects of this is that I think one of the hardest parts of holding a structure to create what we want is keeping different horizons of focus going simultaneously. And I've seen this a lot doing a lot of kind of corporate consulting. We tend to kind of get into the day-to-day of what we need to do, and having some kind of consistent kind of checkpoint where you kind of elevate your attention up a higher level and go, hang on, am I living what I want to be living? You know, and I kind of connect back to the larger picture of the larger vision. So kind of knowing the mechanics of how do I kind of stay on the ground level versus kind of coming back up to this 10,000, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 foot view of my life, you know, and kind of being able to kind of keep these to some degree happening simultaneously is really, really important. You know, so if I'm doing my day to day, do I have a larger context of like, what is this day in terms of the larger context of what I want to be seeing kind of happen in this week and in this month? So keeping that multi-horizon view, kind of, it's quite sophisticated actually, cognitively, right? And a lot of the structure that we live in tends to actually come externally. You know, we tend to get a lot of structure from our kind of work routines. You know, we got structure growing up from our schooling, we get some degree of structure from family and so on. And actually, I think most of us aren't that good at generating structure internally. You know, and it's pretty, I think, advanced actually developmentally to be able to self-generate structure and be able to stay in that structure. It's so common for so many of us to kind of not like have the discipline to like do the things, you know, and kind of get lost, you know. So I think
collapse when not inside of a system.
Yeah, collapse and not exactly, you know, and I know this, you know, I'll go on holidays and all of this amazing discipline I have will just kind of disappear, you know, because I'm like, whoa, okay, and once again I'm confronted with where I don't have like this internal structure to make stuff happen, and it can be really confronting.
I want to do a plug quickly. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I know it wasn't planned, but
yeah.
I think it's a good time to. I just want to say that the stuff that Carly is talking about right now is exactly what we're doing in our Living from Essence course, which is also we'll refer to as Life. This is an amazing 3-month course. We are so excited about teaching it, and it's all the stuff that he's talking about right now. Just like how to hold this creative tension of how to be connected with that which matters most to you, whilst also staying in reality about where you are now and creating structures from inside of you of how do you actually hold this creative tension, how do you be with the parts of you that show up, that present the dissonance of where you really are and where you want to be. So how do you do that kind of subconscious, deep subconscious work. Stay regulated, stay open, have like amazing revelations because you know how to work with your brainwave patterns, and stay grounded, creating structures to make these things that matter to you happen. So I just wanted to say that. I know it wasn't our plan, but that's what we are doing in the life course. And if this stuff is important to you and you feel like that's your jam, check it out on our website, Triibe.Earth. Tribe's got 2 eyes. I will say that to join the life course, you do need to do Express Your Essence, because in that course we lay the groundwork for understanding brainwaves and how to communicate with your subconscious. That's a pretty it's a hardcore 2 weeks, that program. It's like a slap awake, if you like, or a shake awake. Life is much more expansive and it's more like life, right? Express Your Essence is getting you in contact with your essence quickly so you can really taste it. So if you are curious about what I'm talking about, we have an Express Your Essence starting next weekend. It actually starts on the Friday night. So it's actually our last one for the year. So if you're interested in life, check out Express Your Essence starting on Friday. It's cheap as, totally worth it. I'm going to shut up now and let you keep going.
Well, I think just to finish up, just to preview some of the content that we'll get into in the next few days. So, some of the challenges around holding structure is it can kind of start to almost like feel like you become like a slave of your to-do list or something like that. So how do you can kind of, hold that structure in a way that it doesn't start to feel like, oh my God, my life is just kind of lost in like these routines or whatever it is. So I think that's really important to look at. How we actually properly manage our resources is really important. And we framed in one of the values videos that we did, that values in a way kind of are how we decide to manage our personal resources. And by personal resources, I mean, our attention, our time, our money, our energy. And of course, how do we actually also make sure that we're properly resourced, that we're getting enough sleep and that we're eating well and getting exercise, and this is all of the, the day-to-day stuff that kind of can be challenging to kind of juggle all the things, because it's a balancing act, a lot of this stuff. And sometimes I want to purposely imbalance myself because it's going to pay off, in the longer term, so we'll kind of get more into kind of some of the nuances around all of this stuff in the next few days. Anything else?
That's it from me.
Yep.
I'll just say that because this is an overview day, so every chapter of our series starts with an overview day. There won't be a practice in the comments tonight, but if you are catching us for the first time, recommend going back and checking out our values content and doing some of those practices, because it'll make a difference. If you're planning on joining us for the next portion, having done those practices, they're inventory practices, there's some parts work practice in there, that'll have you connected to, you may already be, but if not, it'll have you connected with that which is really important to you, so that whilst we're jamming out over the next few days, it'll feel more concrete for you, that you can apply the things that we're talking about and the practices that we will add into the comments in the next 4 days that is related to this content. You'll have the juice of that which matters most to you to ride on the back of.
Great.
All right, guys.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Bye.